My name is Megan Boudreau, and I work with him and our other colleague, Mario, as part of the Technology Integration Lead team in the HRCE. So a couple things we're going to look at today. This is a beginner session, but the session does not focus on how to get into Classroom. Kind of the understanding here with kind of what I was hoping to do is that this might be a situation where you've already used Classroom, but you want to do a bit more with it. So maybe you kind of jumped into Google Classroom in March because you didn't see much of a choice and you kind of did it out of necessity, but you didn't really have a whole lot of time to figure out how to do some of the nitty gritty, how to do some of the stuff that makes Classroom your bread and butter. So we're going to learn about some of the basic Classroom features, and I will let you know that I'm going to share some more supports with you at the end so that if you've never actually used Classroom before, I'm kind of skipping over that part of getting in and creating Classroom, but I'll share some resources with you that will completely cover that anyway. So don't feel like you're, you're in the wrong spot if you've never used Classroom before. This will still help you. So some of the basic features, we're going to talk about using Classroom to leverage student engagement, the different things you can do. I'm going to show you Classroom in action. So I'm actually going to hop out of this slide deck for the majority of the presentation and show you in real time how a lot of these things work. We're going to talk about different ways that you can connect with students, so using Classroom for differentiation, and then where to go next. So after this, where can you go if you're hungry for more information, or if you need to circle back to the very beginning on how to start with an actual classroom. So before we get started, I always like to include this on any PD that we're doing that has to do with our GNSPES accounts. Some tips for getting started. So this applies to using any of the Google features, not necessarily just Classroom, but it's important that you always use Chrome. I know some of you are diehard Safari fans or diehard Firefox fans, and if so, that's the case. But sometimes, because it's a Google product, it always works better with its own ecosystem. So if you're using Chrome, it really minimizes the opportunity for problems to arise. That said, if you're using Chrome and you're using your GNSPES and weird things are still happening, oftentimes that's because your Chrome browser needs to update. If you've never updated your Chrome browser, you probably have, maybe you just didn't realize. But if you're using the Chrome browser, there will be a green arrow up in the top right-hand corner, or if you're on a Chromebook, there will be a green arrow in the bottom right-hand corner. And this just means that your browser needs to be restarted, or your Chrome operating system needs to be restarted if you're on a Chromebook, and it will automatically apply those updates. So it's not like if you've got a laptop and you get stuck in that circle of updating at like 16% and you didn't realize you were in for a 20-minute thing. It's really quick and simple. It just closes down the browser. The worst part about it is then you have to relog back into GNSPES and open all your tabs. And if you're anything like me, it might be a lot of tabs, but it's worth it because it usually fixes any strange bugs that aren't working for you at the moment. Oh, good to know. Chris said if the arrow goes red, it means that the update's been waiting for you for a little while. Did not know that. Thank you, Chris. It's always important to make sure you're logged in with your GNSPES ID. Okay, so Chris is telling us all about the color codes. Thank you. It's important to be in with your GNSPES ID, not your personal Gmail. This is really important because Classroom doesn't often work or doesn't work well if you're not using your GNSPES account, because if you can't get into our Google Classrooms with a regular Gmail account. It always has to be GNSPES. So if you're unsure, up in the top right-hand corner of any of the Google apps, you're able to click on the profile icon and double check that you're in with your GNSPES. If you're not, you just pop down and click that one or add your GNSPES. I always suggest logging in at gnspes.ca, not going directly to Classroom, because that just ensures that you're going through the same procedures to make sure that everything is logged in. If you're on an iOS device, it will sometimes default to that personal Gmail. So it's important that if you go to Classroom, you're like, where did my classes go? Why can't I join? What's the problem? As you might have worked with that with some of your students over the last couple of months. It's important to go up to that top right-hand corner, or maybe left-hand corner on an iOS, and then just make sure that you're in the correct profile using your GNSPES. So why Google and why Classroom? And I actually stole this slide from Chris, so thanks, Chris. Nice that you're here to see this. Why are we doing this? Why are we using Classroom? Now, aside from the obvious with our current e-learning situation and the uncertainty of what's going to come in September, it's important for us to look at the actual bare bones of this. Why are we using something digital? So a couple of key points, so that the last students of the 90s have already graduated. So all of our in-school students right now, they are not from the 90s for the most part. They would be from the year 2000 and on. You know, and you think of 9/11, today's students, they weren't even around then. So that context, so you think about, we all remember where we were on that day. Things have changed so much from then. We've moved forward. Over half of our students use smartphones more than 5 hours a day, which is scary to think of. But let's make sure that some of that time is using it for something educational in a good way, a way that's going to help and benefit them. And a quarter of them use them over 10.5 hours a day. I'm not even going to that. Maybe even more than that over the last couple of months. And then our students are more diverse than previous generations, diverse in not only their culture and their access, but just as individuals. There's more room, people are more open to express themselves, and we want to give students a great spot to be able to work in something that can be individualized. So we're going to talk a little bit about how those things can apply over the classroom. So I'm going to kind of go in this order. So I'm going to talk to you about the 4 different pages of Classroom. We're going to go in and look at some of the settings. I'm going to have the meat and potatoes mostly on the assignments part of it, show you some tips and tricks on the end, some cool things that you can use within Classroom, and then there'll be some time for questions if you'd like to stick around. So I'm going to hop out of this. You'll notice here there's 3 ways to get to Classroom for us. So you can go directly to classroom.google.com, and you don't have to do this. It's a sit and get this morning, sorry, but it is 9 o'clock, so you just sit back and relax and drink your coffee. Okay. But you can go by classroom.google.com, or you can use the classroom icon on the GNSPES launch page, or the classroom icon on the waffle. And if you don't know what that is, see here. Oh, there's no waffle slides, but I'll show you the waffle. Here's what the waffle looks like here. So I've got my classroom up. What I did is I just created a fake classroom for this PD. So we'll just pretend that this is our classroom class. And this is what Classroom looks like. You've probably seen it before. So up here at the top, we've got our four different pages of Classroom. So we've got the stream, we've got classwork, people, and grades. So your stream is like your main page. I like to think of this almost like your news feed. So it's sort of like if you're on Facebook, it's that main page where everything just kind of auto-populates sort of at the top. There's not a whole lot you can really do to focus it or organize it or do anything like that. If you are using Google Classroom in the younger grades, this is the page you're going to focus on the most because it's the easiest, the most simple, the least amount of clicks to get your students to where you want them to be. If you are using Google Classroom with, I don't know, say like grade 3 and up, you're probably going to focus more on the classwork page. So let's just have a look at the stream here. If you're using due dates, which unless you're teaching junior high or high school, I wouldn't suggest using them. Any upcoming work based on your due dates will appear over here on the left. There's a quick option here on the stream for you to click here and post something very quickly, whether it's an announcement, whether it's a link. Maybe you want your students all to go to a certain web page and you don't want them to have to type in like A, B, C, Y, A. It's going to take forever. Half of them are going to misspell it or they're going to miss the period or something like that. You quickly post a link like this. They just have to go. It appears at the very top. They can click on it and voila, most of them will hopefully get there with no troubles. You can also add quick documents, pictures, websites, YouTube videos, really quick, not a whole lot of organization. Again, like we talked about the whole Facebook feed, everything just kind of appears at the top and keeps moving down. So that's kind of how to do your quick little announcements. There are some options down here that you can create and schedule announcements and respond to your posts. That's all done in here. So you can add, you can schedule. It won't let me do anything without typing in. I would say, welcome to Google Classroom. I could post it immediately. I could add in a document or something if I wanted them to do it. And I'll talk about the different posting options in a minute. But this would be, if I just want to post that straight up announcement, now it'll appear right here on my stream. But welcome to Google Classroom. Up top, I'm going to come to the classwork one last. We have our people page. So once you have your students in, this is where you'll see a list of all of your students. You can quickly send them an email, which is helpful if you've got the age of students that actually check their GNSPES accounts. But you can add students from this tab if you want. Personally, I think this is the more difficult way to do it, but you know your students, or you will eventually know your students well enough to know if they can, you can add them from here. So if you type this or hit this plus sign here, You'll be able to add students. So if I wanted to add Chris, I can just start typing the name, and you'll see that his GNSPES pops up right here. So once I have him selected, so you could sit next to a student. You could also start typing out their GNSPES ID. Nope, I remember my daughter's, but anyway, you can start typing that there and it will pop up. That's really helpful if you have a student that has a really common name, like John Smith. Maybe there would be a lot. I say that if I search, there's probably only one, but this way you just click invite, and now Chris is going to get that invite as a student. And then eventually once he's accepted that invite, then his name will appear here. I could also add other teachers. You can add up to 20 teachers, and I can't remember the limit on students, but it would be nothing more than you would need for your classroom. If you're a circuit teacher, it might be different. Chris, do you remember what the limits are for students? Is it 200? Is it more than that? No, it's got to be more than that. Anyway, I'm sure there's a limit, but we can chat a little bit more about that.
Sorry, I don't remember.
I don't remember either. It's just a quick Google. I'm not worried about it. We can talk about that after. So you'll see your teachers and your students here. So the thing about teachers, if you add teachers, they have access to everything. You can't limit the amount of access that they have to everything in your classroom. They have access to all your student work. They can post, they can assign. They also have access to all of the student work in their shared with me section of their Google Drive, which they don't always like. Oh, there. So Chris has shown up in my, thank you, Chris. Chris has accepted the invitation to join my class. So now you'll see here, I could always click next to his name. If I wanted to get rid of him, I could remove him, I could email him, or I could mute him because I have commenting on right now so that he can't comment anything because maybe he hasn't been a very nice boy and he's not saying nice things on the stream where they can comment. So you can add and remove people from here. So maybe you have a student in your class and then at Christmas time they have moved to another school. You can click on them and you can remove them from your classroom if they don't need to be there anymore. The grades tab I'm not going to focus on a whole lot, mostly because it'll be up to you whether you apply grades here. I think that's a little bit more on the advanced part. I don't want to worry too much about that. If you want to learn more about grades, we can talk a little bit about that at the end if you want to know a bit more. But really, the way I kind of see it, and I haven't used Classroom in a while for a class setting, but there's no real way to export all of your grades into PowerSchool. So to me, if you're grading it, doing all your grading in Classroom, then you got to re-put it into PowerSchool. Maybe that's not the most efficient way of doing it, but that's something that you can look at a little bit later. So the classwork page is sort of the meat and potatoes of Google Classroom. So this is where you're able to kind of create your digital portfolio of assignments as it goes. So there's lots of different options here. You can set up your Google Meet. You can do that from the settings too, so I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. But it tells you here, because I don't have an assignment, you can assign work to your class here. So by just clicking that create button, it's going to give you lots of different assignments. Where I suggest that you start before you even start posting assignments is by creating topics. This is going to help keep you organized, but also to help keep your students organized. And it's up to you on how you want to section off your topics. So it depends on what you are teaching, what grade you're teaching, subjects, etc. So if, for example, you were teaching a grade 4 class, maybe your topics might be, Unit 1, or you might have your English language arts topic. So I'll just like ELA. So you might have an English language arts topic. So now I've got an ELA topic. Maybe I also want to create a math topic. And then, of course, because it's me, I'm going to create a technology topic. Now, these are going the newest ones to the top. You can click and drag your sections around. So maybe if you're doing more right now in Google Classroom on ELA, you want to bring that up to the top, just to bring it to the top of students, they can see it more. This way, anytime you post an ELA assignment, you would put it in your ELA topic. So that way, it keeps things a little bit more organized. Now, if you were teaching something like junior high or high school, you might want to section it off into Unit 1, Unit 2, Unit 3, Unit 4, more individual topics. Really, it's whatever works best for you. But the nice thing about this is if you go in and say, you start in September and then all of a sudden we're in March and you have so many things in here that you've got so many assignments and the student wants to go, like we're doing a math assignment right now. Over here on the left, students can just click math and it will only show all of the classwork that is within that math topic. So it allows them more quickly to find the information that you've put in there. What I've noticed is that a lot of people who are new to classroom, especially when you kind of jumped in because maybe you felt like you had to with the past e-learning, they just kind of posted and just got them there so that students can access. But as you're going, if you create those topics first or topics as you go when you need them, it really helps to keep this page organized so you have a better idea of how, a better idea of where your assignments live. And it doesn't mean you have to stick with it. Maybe you start out and you put in a math assignment and then later on you realize it kind of is more technology focused. Just like I can click and drag these sections, I can also click and drag assignments and move them into the different topics. So back up to this create assignment here. So there's a couple of different options. Assignment I will focus on a little bit more in a minute. So this is kind of the one you'd use most often. We'll talk about quiz later. Question, you can pose a question to your students. You can give them, there's the option of short answer or multiple choice. The last time I checked this over here so students can see the class summary, you need to just figure out whether you want students to be able to see the answers or not. So in the past, it was always open to everyone. So I always cautioned people against using this question because you needed to make sure students know that once they submit their answer, other students could see it, because that might make a difference between what a student is actually writing for their answer. It's always good to let them know that so that they don't write something personal and then have other students be able to see it. But I believe now that has changed, you can make it different so that students don't see that. If you wanted to add grades to it, you could, but you can add in a question. And this, once it's posted, let me see here, what is your favorite color? So option 1, be red, blue, green, yellow. And then if I click create, I can also add a document to it. Click create. Yeah, we can all see. Oh, I don't want to create a document here. Sorry, I went down a rabbit hole. Oh, here it is. Up here, that's what I was looking for. The ask button. I can also ask it now. I can ask it later. I can come back to this, but I'm just going to click ask. And I'm going to put this under my ELA topic. We're just winging it here. So once this is posted, now you can see that this question is listed here under what is your favorite color. It also goes to the top of the stream. So when students log in, they see on this page the most recent things that have been added. There's really not a whole lot of ways to organize what's on this page. I think you can move it to the top. You can move things to the top, but you can't really move a whole lot else around here. You can't click and drag on this page. But on classwork, like I said, maybe this is actually supposed to be a math question. I can move it down to the math topic. When I click on that, I can see that Chris's favorite color is blue, and I know that because he's the only student in the class. But I can see how many students have answered, how many have looked at it but not answered yet, and I can see the status of what is here. And I have not given it a due date, so it doesn't appear on that first page under upcoming work. So that is there. With creation, material is one that I would suggest that you use. The difference I'd say between material and assignment is actionable versus non-actionable. So if it's actionable and it requires the students to do something, I would suggest you use an assignment. If it's not actionable, so it's a website you want them to visit, it's a study resource, so maybe a vocabulary list or a PDF version that's legit of the book that you're using, you want to post that under material. That way it's just there for them to access whenever they want. It's not something that they need to use for an assignment in itself. So if I click material, I'm just going to put vocabulary list. I can give it a description if I want. I'm going to say Unit 2, Math, Vocabulary. And then maybe I'm going to add a link to the website. This is not accurate. You're just seeing how this works. I'm going to add the link. So now here's the link. Oh, it is good. Of course, that's a website. I've got my title, what it actually is. I'm going to put it on my topic here in math, and I'm going to post it. So now under math, I have a vocabulary list. So I know that students can just click on that and access it whenever they want. If I think that's less important than the favorite color, I can click and drag it down on the list so that the most recent one is on the top, or the one that I feel is more important is on the top. So I'm going to look at assignment here because I think this is kind of the most important one. And from what I've gotten from feedback from teachers, they were using this a lot when you're new to classroom, but didn't know a whole lot of the features that can be used to make this a much better feature of Google Classroom. So for today, the test assignment kind of that I have that we're going to work with today is called Shakespeare Research Questions. So what's nice about this is it gives you the ability to hear Shakespeare Research Questions. It gives you the ability to do lots of different things as opposed to just assigning a plain worksheet. So what I've done here is I've created a document that's called Shakespeare Research Questions, and it's a hyperdoc, which means that it's a worksheet, but it's an interactive worksheet, and I'll show it to you in just a second here. So my instructions for my students are to answer the questions in the document below. Turn in when complete. It's always nice to remind students to turn it in because sometimes they'll do all the work, but if they don't click the turn it in button, it doesn't mark as turned in. But if you're doing it this way, you'll have access to their assignments the second that they start working on it, which I think is a really, really big benefit of using Google Classroom. I'm going to go to add, and I want to add in that document from my Google Drive. So I opened it recently, so hopefully it shows up in my recent. Here it is here. So now I've got my title, I've got my instructions, I've added in the document that I want them to look at, which I will just drag over here and show you. So here's the document here. So I've prepared this as like a digital worksheet, but because worksheet is sort of a dirty word lately, what I've done is I've updated it to make it more interactive so that students aren't just reading and copying and paste. They actually have to interact with it, go through, find an answer. Some of it's their opinions and put it in. You can see here, the question is like, why are Shakespeare's birth and death related? And I've given them a link here that they can click on that will take them to information about William Shakespeare. They can have a look at this, go through, find the answer, type it here in the answer sheet because they're each going to get their own copy of this. It's really excellent about Classroom. Here. So right now the default is that students can view files. So anytime you attach a document to your Google Classroom, the default is that they can see it, but they can't do anything with it because we don't want them accessing your documents and changing it so that the next time you go, it's just got their answers in it. Keeps yours as a template. They can just see it. But in this case, I don't want them to have to open it up and then make their own copy and then reattach it here because that's a lot of work that I know students might forget to do. So we're going to make this easier by clicking the down arrow and selecting make a copy for each student. This is probably the best feature of Google Classroom. So what this does is it creates a document that is like a digital photocopy. As soon as a student opens this assignment, their own copy is made. It doesn't affect yours. It renames it as Chris Chochek - Shakespeare Research Questions. And I can see it immediately. As soon as that student opens this assignment and that's created, I have access to it through Google Classroom or through the Classroom folder in your Drive because it's immediately shared. They didn't have to share it with me. They didn't have to add it. They didn't have to do anything. Now, the downfall is that if you forget to put this as make a copy for each student before you post it, you can't go back and edit it. Has to do with the way Google works, Google Classroom works in the background. So if this is your outcome, this is what you want to do, you want to make a copy for each student, you have to do it before you post it. Otherwise, you have to delete the assignment and go back and do it again. Go in and edit it and make a copy for each student. So that is there. One of the other options as well is students can edit the file. And I'll talk a little bit when I look at differentiation why maybe this is something you might want to choose every once in a while. But just remember that if you post this to all your students as students can edit, they're going to all go in the same document and they're all going to make edits. And there's not a whole lot of time when that is the best way of doing things. So you'd always just want to kind of keep in mind, what is the main goal for sending out this document? And make a copy for each student. I want to include all my students. So over here, say I'm teaching junior high and I have 3 ELA classes, and I don't want to have to go through, and they're all doing the same thing. They're all in the same spot. I can actually go in and select multiple classes to post the same assignment to. So it's a really nice time saver. For today, however, I only want to post it to this one classroom. I will leave that there. Over here is really nice because as a default, you'll likely post most things to all students. However, say you have 2 students that are on modifications or on an IPP. What you can do is you can, so right now I only have Chris in here, but that's fine. I can uncheck all students, only select the students that I want it to go to, or I can just deselect maybe those 2 students that need modifications. And then that way it will only go to those students. Those students who don't have it checked won't see this assignment at all. And then what you do is you go back and you post the same assignment again, but then you post the modified version, and then you only select the names of those students that get the modified version, because then in the end, all of the students have the assignment. It's all the same name. But if I'm on modifications and the person sitting next to me, maybe, socially distanced next to me, we hope, it will look like we're doing the same thing, but mine is differentiated for me and no one else knows. The only person that knows that I have something different is the teacher and myself, as long as you make it look the same. So it's a really nice way to have everyone feel included, but also only push through the correct assignment at the right level for the various students at the various levels. And no one has to look like they're doing something different. You don't have to have a separate classroom for students in an IPP, which you used to sort of have to do with Moodle. So this is a really nice way of having everyone be included, but pushing through different assignments for different people. Another way you might want to use this all students part is if you're doing small group work. So sticking sort of with the English language arts examples, if you have, you're doing maybe literacy circles and you have one group of 5 working on one book, another group of 5 working on a different book, you can push through assignments for that one specific book just to those 4 students. Or maybe you want them to collaborate on one document. You put it through just to those 4 students. That's a time where you might use the students can edit file, so that it would be only those 3 or 4 students and yourself that have access, but then you can see everyone's. But if I'm working on one book, I don't need to see all of the work that the other students are doing. So that's a really great way too to use maybe only mini students if you're doing group work. Just push it through to those individual students, which is excellent. Another way you can do this too is in the past, I used to teach high school, and we had a lot of students that would leave for the entire month of April, so lucky, to go to paddling camp down in Florida. So what I would do is I didn't want everyone to see all of the work that those students were going to be doing. Sometimes it was a little bit different. Oftentimes it was stuff we hadn't gotten to yet. And I could just post through a whole bunch of assignments and send it only to that student so that they're all in the same classroom. But I knew that when Sean went down to go paddling, I could put through those 6 assignments for him and he could see them, but no one else had access to those. It still keeps me in the same spot. All the student work goes there, but students only see what you assign to them. If you want to put in a due date, you can do that here. I'm going to attach this to my ELA topic. You do have the option right now to add a rubric. That's a little bit more advanced, but if you've created a rubric or you want to create a rubric, you can click plus import a rubric from Sheets. So that might be something you want to explore at another time. I don't want to focus too much on it right now. And then you do have the option to check originality reports for up to 3 if you're doing an essay. Again, that's pretty advanced, but you can play around with that on your own. So right now I'm just going to double check what I've got here. So I've got my title, I've got my instructions, I've attached my document, and I've made a copy for each student. I'm just leaving it at 100 because I'm not going to actually grade it through Google Classroom. It's for the correct classroom, and I'm pushing it through to all students. So I'm ready to go. I can just click assign. But say maybe I needed to keep editing it, but you know what? It's the end of the day and my kids are hungry and I just can't finish it right now. This down arrow gives you a few more options. So I can save this draft and come back and edit it later if I'm not ready to do anything with it. But I can also schedule a post. This, I find, the scheduling of posts is really helpful if you know for whatever reason, maybe that you've got a substitute in for the next couple of days, or you are just trying to plan, but you don't want the assignment to go up until the class starts. You can click schedule and you can decide when this assignment will post. So I've found this helpful in the past because sometimes you get those kids that will go in and do the work before you've even given context. And if students have the classroom app, they might have it to push through notifications. So if you post this at like 4 o'clock on a Tuesday, but you're not planning on doing it until Wednesday afternoon, you might get those students that go in Tuesday night, do it all wrong because you weren't there to help them because they know it's there. You can schedule it to post. So maybe I don't want this to post until Tuesday, of course, 31st at 8 a.m. I can click schedule. So now it's posted through. If I go back, it should be, here it is. So it's grayed out, which means it's scheduled. It's scheduled for tomorrow at 8. But you know what? Maybe I do want to push it through now. So I can click on it, hit the 3 dots and go to edit. This is also where you would go if you made a spelling mistake or you needed to make changes. But remember, you can't go back in and edit and select make a copy for each student if you hadn't done that already. But you know what? I don't want to schedule anymore. I actually want to post it through. I just want, of course they changed this. Here we go. I'm just going to click assign now, and that's going to push it through to all of my students. Double checking. You want to do it now because they're all going to be able to see it. So it's posted immediately. As it goes. And now here is that assignment. It also shows up at the top of the stream. So students can click here to get to it. I see the student work. So what you would typically see, you've probably seen this before, is all your students are here. You can see turned in and assigned. So this is a really interesting spot here because if I had 18 students in my class, it's not going to say 18 students assigned. It doesn't actually list assigned until that student clicks on the assignment itself. So this is why that's important. Some people have said, is there a way in Classroom to see what my students have accessed? They haven't done it, but I don't know, like, have they looked at it or have they been in? When you post an assignment that says make a copy for each student, you will see on this page if no assignment has been created for them, they haven't looked at it. But if it says assigned and their name is here and the assignment has created for them, it means they've looked at it, but they haven't done anything with it yet. So kind of an interesting way to sort of use this student work. You'll also see them over here. If you're using grades, you can type in the grades from here. If you're using feedback, you can also put in your feedback and your comments and send it back as well. I can also see my instructions up here and my student work, make edits or changes. And then if I go back, click here, now I can see that on my classwork. If it was supposed to be in my technology section, I can click and move it down. So that is a bit about the assigning a classroom. Now, I mentioned a little earlier about if you are using this all year and maybe you're using it quite heavily all year, you might end up with a lot of assignments that are in here. There is no way to hide assignments. You either have to delete them or you have to leave them here. But one of the tips that's kind of floating around out on the internet is that you can create a topic called archive. So if I go and create a topic, call it archive, I put it at the bottom. What I can do is that anytime an assignment is done, and we don't need to look at it, I've got it, marked or assessed, or I've looked at it for formative and I moved on from it. I can take it and I can move it down. So maybe I don't need my what is your favorite color question anymore. I can just move it down to this archive tab. It'll stay at the bottom, but it gets it out of the way. It doesn't delete it. It does leave them there. You can't move a whole topic down to your archive. But basically, it creates everything sort of at the bottom that you don't need to look at anymore. And then if you did need to go back, it's there. Now, you might be asking, why not just delete it? If I don't want it there anymore, why don't I just delete it? Well, you don't want to do that because here is why. So last year, you might have worked really hard to create your Google Classroom over the last couple of months or over the whole year, if you were in earlier than that. But September is a new year with new students, most likely, and you're going to be starting at the beginning again. if you create a brand new classroom, so I would always suggest new classroom, new year, or new year, new classroom. But then you start out blank, but you put all this work into your classroom from last year. Here is why you don't want to delete your assignments. You want to just leave them here or move them down to archive. You go to create and go down to reuse post. So what this will do is you can pick the class that you want to reuse a post from. Even your archived classes are here. So I'm going to go all the way down here and select English 10. Why not? Because I think there's, of course, there was no assignments in there. I know that there would be some in here. Nope. Let's find one here. Here we go. So maybe we're going to work on my paint.net fish assignment here. So I'm going to click this assignment because I want to do it again. I'm going to click reuse. It does give me the option to make all of those changes. I think this must have been a test assignment. I can edit any instructions as necessary. I can add new documents or edit the documents that were already there. And then once I'm done, I'm going to click assign. So if you've spent a long time putting together a big assignment for your students, you can pull it in every year. And it's excellent if you've been kind of keeping organized or putting everything down in your archive, because it's all there ready for you to pull in. You would change a couple words or decide who you want to send your students to and then post through. You'll notice here I posted this without adding it to a topic. So it just appeared at the very top. So the topics come in here underneath. But if I wanted to move this down to my technology one, then I can click and drag it. Or if it was something I wanted them to see and stay at the top, I could just leave this at the very top, and it will always be the first. It will always be the first one that you see. It is up here. Arrow won't let me go up. Anyway, so it will go up there, and again, I can just filter just for technology if that's the hour that we're working on right now or anything like that. So that is most of the things here that are in the create assignment. I'm going to pop back into my list of topics that I wanted to cover. Settings and tips. Okay, so that is sort of how to use Classroom. There's a couple back-end things that are really important that are nice and easy that I want to show you. So up here in the settings cogwheel, I'm going to click this. When you create your assignment, or sorry, when you create your classroom, all of this information is asked for in the beginning. The only one that's required is the class name. You don't have to have a description, section, or room number, but this is where you would go to edit that or change that later on if you did want to add some of those things in, or you made a typo, or you realized that you just didn't need those things in. It can be helpful for you if maybe you're teaching 4 sections of English 10 or you know, a whole bunch of whatever it is that you're working on. You can add in your section like block A, block B, whatever it is. If you teach in different rooms and you want to remind your student what room you're in, you can always put what room you're actually in here. Here is your class code. It is an auto-generated class code. You can't decide on it yourself, but I always try to like to find the class codes that don't have I's or O's or zeros or L's, because they all tend to look the same. Like, is that a capital I or is it a lowercase l? Is it an O? Is it a 0? So I always like to go through and just keep resetting until I find one that's shorter and easier to read. It's a little hard on the eyes. As you can see there, a lowercase I is like that, but there. So JDBSYG3. And depending on the font too, you may want to, in the age of your students, you might want to avoid one that has an A, because it is the A with the top part on it, and your younger students might not have seen A's like that before. Right here is that the default is that students can post and comment, and I would very much caution you about allowing students to post on the classroom page. And the only reason I say that is because we have enough on the go. The last thing that we really need to be is a chat room moderator. Sometimes if you forget, you'll get all these notifications and you go in and you get someone saying like, what's up, and hey, and maybe some inappropriate things, and you got to go in and delete them. So my suggestion is, when you first create your classroom, to come in here and make it so that only teachers can post and comment. It just kind of locks it down so that it's a straight up work thing. Now, maybe at some point you do want them to be able to post. You can go in and change this, allow them to, you know, comment. And then once that commenting is done, then you can go back to having this here, because maybe you're going to post some student work and you want them to go in and make comments and give feedback. That's completely a valid way to do that, but I would caution against having it open all of the time. It does make for a lot of work for you to go in and either delete or moderate what students are saying. Also, generating a Meet link. So this is new. It came out almost too late last year. But if you're going to be using Google Meet with your, again, we're all trying to figure out what September is going to look like. We know that we're back on the go for September, but at any point, right, that could change. So what you can do here is you can generate your Meet link directly through Google Classroom. So it allows access for your students. The link is already there. You don't have to go into meet.google.com and create one. You don't have to go in and schedule one in your calendar. You can do it right here within your Meet. And when I make this visible to generate my Meet link, you can make it visible to students or not. You can make it visible only when it's time, or you can leave it on all the time. But students can't go in until you go in. I believe you still have to be the last one to leave. I did hear that if you leave, it kicks students out within a minute or two, but then people were saying that that actually wasn't happening. So it's always good practice to make sure you're the last one there. It also makes it so that you're the teacher moderator, so you can boot people out if they're not leaving. One thing I want to caution you about with this, however, is that I'm going to go back to the main session here. Oh, you save up here. Always good to save your stuff. So now you'll see that the Meet link is shown here. And if I have students that are using a desktop, a laptop, or a Chromebook, they're going to see this link, no problem. But the iOS version or the app version hasn't quite caught up. So if you have students at home and you want them to connect and they're using a phone or an iPad or a tablet, you're going to need to copy this link. Oops. Go into it. You're going to need to copy this link and you're going to want to post it for everyone here on the actual on the stream, so that your students who are using the app version of Classroom can access this link. Otherwise, your students using the apps will log in and it doesn't show them this link at the top, so they won't be able to click it to access it. So making sure that you are inclusive to all, it's really good that if you're going to use that Meet link, make sure it's posted. Other things will pop up to the top, but then maybe when it's time again, you can repost it, or you can click on the three dots, move it back to the top. That's a bit about what to do in the settings in creating that Meet link. I'll hop back in here. So those are kind of some of the tips, assignments. And I think that brings us back to any questions that we might have. Oh, one more thing I wanted to do here, sorry. So using Classroom with parents, just pop this up on the main screen. So there's been a bit of debate about whether you use Guardian Summaries or you add student emails on the people page. Sometimes random emails pop up. My suggestion, this has always been my suggestion, is that you take caution when using Guardian Summaries and having parent emails connected. They can't get into the Classroom themselves, and sometimes Classroom will auto send updates to whatever email that is in there. You don't have a whole lot of control over it. And my caution is that sometimes it doesn't give context. So to give you an example of that, maybe you did put a due date in to keep your students organized, that the Shakespeare assignment is due on Friday. Put in your due date of Friday. But then all of a sudden on Friday, you check out where your students are, and then you realize that they do really need some more time. So you say, you know what, everyone, I'm going to extend this so that you can finish this on Monday. But because life gets busy, maybe you forget to go in and change that due date. When that due date passes, any of the students that haven't passed it in on that Friday, because you gave them an extension, an email can automatically go out to those parents saying your student has not passed in this assignment, which can create some really awkward, uncomfortable, and potentially volatile conversations at home when the parent says, well, why didn't you do this assignment? Well, no, they gave us until Monday. Like, well, the due date here, I got this email that says it's late. And you really want to avoid against those emails that don't have those contexts. The other thing that I always like to mention is that it can sometimes pull emails from PowerSchool. If there are any custodial issues, you don't want to create a problem where one parent email is in the system and the other one isn't, and it's automatically sending updates to one parent and not the other. So I always just like to make sure that if you are using those Guardian Summaries, do so with caution. And only when you feel that it is right for you. My suggestion to sort of get around that and to create maybe a more inclusive and a conversational tone with that is to suggest when a parent asks, hey, can you add me into the classroom or put me in for guardian summaries? Is to suggest that the parent sit down, or the parent or guardian sit down with the student and go through the classroom, have the student log in, have the student explain to them, this is what we're working on now. They can show them their work. They can give that context that they don't get with those automatically generated emails that are sent out from Google Classroom. It encourages them to talk a little bit about it and maybe explain, and just that other layer of knowledge that can help with the student if they're explaining what they've already done. I did throw in a link here on this document here that talks about Alice Keeler's Parent Corner. I'll mention a little bit about Alice Keeler in a minute. One of the things that I like her suggestion is for those younger students is creating a parent corner on the assignments. I'm going to click on this link and show you where it's going to take you to here. So what she has suggested is that on the bottom of an assignment, when you post it, you include, like, you put in your description at the bottom, parent corner. So maybe like a couple of enters, then you write parent corners. And then you put something in kind of like this. I know it's a small picture. Oh, of course. So it says parent corner. How do you create a slider in Desmos? Why would you want to do that? What patterns did you observe? So parents, it's just kind of like giving you a little bit of context as to what the assignment is. So if I know my parent is going to sit down with my student and they're going to be looking at this assignment, it's almost like a little note to parents, like, hey parent, if you're reading this, this is what we're doing. Here's some questions you can ask your student to check their knowledge or to engage in that educational conversation at home. And this isn't anything new. It's just right within the assignment, but you've labeled it as Parent Corner. And I just think that's a really nice way to not have to do anything extra. And it encourages the time that, you know, we hope that they have, but they don't all have, to sit down with their student and look at what they're doing. And it gives that context without them having to email you all the time and say, like, what are they doing? What's happening in Google Classroom? What's up with this assignment? So if you kind of get into the habit of adding in just a quick little parent corner, here's what we're discussing today, or here's what you can ask them about this, or give some context. I think that I really like that idea. I think it's a nice way to have parents be a little bit more involved in the platform with context. So that link is there in that slide deck. I'm just going to go back into full screen here. So a little bit about on where to go next. So I know this was a lot of information in a short amount of time, not a whole lot of slides to reflect on later. So I'm going to show you some ways that you can kind of go forward and learn a little bit more about a lot of the stuff that I just threw at you at 9 o'clock in the morning on a Thursday, one of the hottest days of the summer. On our Tilt eLearning page, so the link is there. There's a problem with my G. I'll make sure that's fixed. We have a ton of slide decks and resources and videos and walkthroughs that will show you pretty much everything and more that I've talked about here if this has completely gone over your head. We did record this session, so you can always go back and watch this. If I speak too fast for you, which I know I do sometimes, trying to fit it all in, you can change your speed on YouTube and slow me down to make it a little bit easier to follow if you found it fast. But here's some places to go aside from our Tilt eLearning page. Ditch That Textbook is a website by a guy named Matt Miller, and he does a lot of Google stuff. He has a lot of really great tips and ideas for Google Classroom. I would suggest signing up for his newsletter, as well as possibly following on Twitter as well. Alice Keeler has a lot of Google stuff out there. I don't suggest following her on Twitter. Aside from my own personal opinion of a lot of her tweets, she tweets a lot, like a lot. I followed her, and maybe 3 hours later I unfollowed her because she tweets almost like every 10 minutes. It feels it's too much. But her website has a lot of really great tips and tricks and tutorials and walkthroughs, and it's definitely worth having a look for things more than just Google Classroom, like everything Google. Shake Up Learning is the same. You can find a lot of really great PDFs or tutorials and walkthroughs on the Shake Up Learning site. There's the Google Teacher Training Center, and literally if you just Google Teacher Training Center, you can find lots of getting started, first day with classroom stuff on their site. I do have another slide deck that I've used for this presentation in the past that's a little bit more detailed. I wanted to try to cut down on the time because this one I'm going to click on here for a second always goes over. But if you click on this Getting Started with Google slide deck or Google Classroom, it goes into more detail with screenshots on a lot of the stuff that we talked about today. So this is a really good resource for you as well. So I would suggest checking that out. I think this is also on our Tilt eLearning page, but I wanted to mention that as well. And I'm just going to copy that link and paste it into the chat for you if you want to. And I'm going to paste that into the chat box here. This would be a good one to make a copy of and leave in your drive, because it just has more context than what we're doing here today. And then Google. If you don't know how to do something and you don't know who to ask, just Google it. I mean, I know that sounds pretty basic, and sending you back to Google for something Google seems a little bit rudimentary, but there is so much information out there, and there's so many videos and tutorials and walkthroughs and people's opinions that if you don't know how to do something, you can just quickly Google it. I just want to say thank you so much for deciding to spend your Thursday morning with me for the last 54 minutes. I really appreciate you come and learning more, but I do want to remind you that it doesn't have to stop here. By all means, please, my email will be up on that screen in a few minutes if you're in the other tab, but you're more than welcome to reach out for support at any time if you have any questions. It doesn't matter if you're not in the HRCE, you're more than welcome to send me a quick email. I'll answer it for you, or maybe I'll refer you to the person who was like Chris and I in your region, because there are various versions of the us in the different regions across the province and boards. My Twitter is mboudreauHRCE, and we also kind of all work on the Tilt HRCE account as well. If you're in the HRCE, you can sign up for our newsletter at bit.ly/tiltnews. Someone asked me in my session yesterday, like, do you have to be in the HRCE to sign up for our newsletter? No, a lot of it will be HRCE related, but we also do send out tips, and I'm pretty sure there are a few other people from other regions that have signed up for it. So if it's just a slide deck that we send out about once a month, sometimes 2 a month, sometimes 1 every 2 months, depending on what's going on with grant opportunities, tips and tricks for integrating tech in the classroom, and some PD stuff. So if you'd like to sign up for that, you're more than welcome.